The following is a production of Stevenson Media. Want to tip the host? Just scan the QR code or click the link in the description. Get a free Houston Sports State of the Union podcast t-shirt with a donation of $50 or more.
This is the Houston Sports State of the Union podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, the president of Houston Sports Nation, Nick Stevenson.
My goodness, thank you so much. And please be seated. My fellow Houstonians, welcome to this Houston Sports State of the Union address for the week of March 9th. I am the self-appointed president of Houston Sports Nation, Nick Stevenson. There's a million different things you could be doing on this Saturday afternoon if you are choosing to spend a little bit of time with me. I appreciate it. If you are listening to this after the live, I appreciate it. Anybody who listens to, watches, or some combination of both to the Houston Sports State of the Union podcast, I really do appreciate it. And also let me shout out those of you who have been watching the Twin Toros podcast as well, with myself and my partner, Ruben Calavillo, in association with ESPN Houston. It's been a minute since I got back with you guys, so I'm glad to be here. We have a lot to talk about on today's show. Since I've seen you last, the Texans have done a complete overhaul on their roster starting on the first day of free agency. We will get into that. The Houston Rockets are back to their winning ways, but will it last? And are the Houston Rockets the team that everybody in the playoffs wants to play? We'll talk about that as well. I'm also going to let you guys know why I have yet to address the Houston Astros spring training. We will talk about all of that and more, but really quick, let me remind you of the ways that you can support the show. One of them, hopefully you're doing right now. You listen, you watch, you share with your friends and family. Please remember to follow, like, subscribe wherever you get your podcast fix. I will be leaving the links to all of my content in the description of this live or this video or this audio, whatever way you're consuming the podcast. As soon as this live is done, I will be putting links to all of my different socials and links to wherever you want to listen or watch the podcast. Another way to support the show, if you would like to, if you're watching the video right now, there is a QR code in the corner. If you are unable to scan that QR code, it's okay. I will be putting a link in the description. That QR code, that link will be to my tip jar. If you would like to leave anything for me, it will go directly back into bringing you guys good Houston sports content, both here at Houston Sports State of the Union podcast and on the Twin Toros. A donation of $50 or more will get you some free Houston Sports State of the Union podcast swag of your choice, whether you want a hat, cap, hoodie. I'm actually not wearing any right now. However, the t-shirts are cool, the hats are cool, and I would love to see the brand expand. So $50 or more will get you t-shirt, hat, hoodie, whichever you prefer. I will also be putting Amazon links for Houston Sports fan gear, such as the hoodie that I'm wearing right now, or the equipment that I'm using to bring you this show. Those Amazon links, if you purchase either Houston Sports fan gear or the equipment for podcasting from my Amazon links, then I will get a commission from that as well, and that will go back into this show. So those are the ways you can support me, but the number one way you can support is by watching the show, sharing the show with your friends, continuing to follow all of the socials. And for those of you who are doing that, I really do appreciate it. Okay, now that we've got that run down, it's Saturday. You guys probably have a lot of things to do. I know there's college basketball going on. But if you're rocking with me, I do appreciate it. Let's go ahead and get into it. I want to start with the state of the Houston Texans. Okay. The Houston Texans got busy on day one of free agency. And oddly enough, the biggest, and they've made a lot of moves since then, but the biggest move that they made happened on day one, and it was not a free agent acquisition. It was somebody that they got rid of. As you know by now, the Texans have traded Laramie Tunsil to the Washington Commanders in return for a 2026 second round pick, a 2026 fourth round pick, and then a 2025 third and seventh round pick. That's what they will be receiving from the Commanders. They give up, obviously, Laramie Tunsil, and they give up a fourth round pick, I believe, this season. If you'll excuse me, I'm starting to get cottonmouth a little bit. I think it's a good deal. Right off the bat, I'm just going to let you guys know that. And at the risk of sounding like hey, I've been talking about that guy, I have been talking about that. As a matter of fact, the day the information or the news dropped, I had planned on getting on the Twin Toros podcast with my fellow Twin Toro, Ruben Calavillo. And I wanted to suggest the possibility that the Texans should consider trading Laramie Tunsil. Well, they did it, and I'm glad that they did. But here's the reasons why I thought that they should, and I'm glad that they did. Number one, Laramie Tunsil costs a lot of money. Now, you get what you pay for. Laramie Tunsil is a premier pass protector. You can deal with his false starts, I guess, as long as he's keeping your franchise quarterback off of his butt and off of the injured list. And to an extent, I guess, that's the argument that my partner Ruben has always argued, is that you can deal with the false starts because he's a premier pass protector. To an extent, I agree with that. The problem is that Laramie Tunsil is the captain of that offensive line, and that offensive line was terrible. And despite how good he may be in pass protection, the offensive line lacked discipline, it lacked communication, and him being the captain, you would think some of that has to fall on him, right? Well, he never thought so. He set a record for offensive penalties, pre-snap penalties, last season. And when he was asked about it in the thick of it, when everything was happening, we talked about this before. He threw all of his teammates under the bus. He said it's my name that's getting called out there. But the problem is the communication on the offensive line overall. And I said at the time, both on this show and on Twin Toros, even if that's true, you being a veteran, you being the captain of that offensive line, that is your opportunity to fall on the sword. And you did not do so. And so that was already a kind of a red flag for me. Him not showing up to training camp multiple years in a row. Just his overall laissez-faire attitude. And listen, by all accounts, all of Laramie Tunsil's teammates loved him. I'm not saying that he's a bad guy. I just didn't feel like he was the D'Amico kind of guy. That relentless swarm mentality, eat, sleep, breathe football, nothing else matters on Sunday, but competing for your teammates, competing for your team, competing for your city. And he just, I don't know. I'm not saying he's a bad player. I'm not saying he's a bad guy. Like I said, he's one of the best left tackles in the league. And in all honesty, I think that the Houston Texans probably will miss him this season. However, this season is not, let me just put it to you this way. D'Amico Ryans did not get a 6-year contract to throw it all in the center of the table for this season. I'm not saying they shouldn't try to win. I'm not saying they should not try to be Super Bowl contenders. However, this move was made for the future, both by Nick Caserio, and I'm sure D'Amico Ryans had to say so. You have contract extension coming up for Derek Stingley Jr. Derek Stingley Jr., even though he was not drafted by D'Amico Ryans, is a D'Amico Ryans kind of guy. Will Anderson Jr., CJ Stroud, you will have to be paying them very, very soon. You're going to have to make a decision about Jalen Petrie. So it was time, number one, to not only change the culture of the offensive line, but to change the culture, or not maybe the culture, the strategy that the Houston Texans are now approaching with. We've talked about so many times, while you're a quarterback and your young talent is cheap, go all in on spending money. When it gets time to pay your young talent, then it's when you start to shift and you're going to have to save money where you can and be very effective in the draft. Well, it appears, as we've been saying for the past couple of seasons, that is the route that the Houston Texans have taken. They completely overhauled the offensive line, and people were mad. Some people were mad. I was not mad, because they traded Tunsil. They got rid of Shaq Mason. They cut Shaq Mason. They traded away later Kenyon Green, which I don't think anybody was mad about that, because in return, you got C.J. Gardner-Walker from the Eagles, which we'll get to in a minute. But now there's not very much experience on this offensive line. There were some other linemen that were added later. The Texans traded a 6th-round pick for Ed Ingram from the Minnesota Vikings. And look, the Texans got a first-hand look at him when the Vikings beat the crap out of the Texans in week 3 last season. He started the first 9 games of the season for the Vikings, and then he ended up being benched in favor of Dalton Reisner. However, the Texans saw something in him. I'm not saying he's your permanent answer at either guard position, but he's another body. They added Laken Tomlinson. They're doing a complete overhaul of the offensive line. And I think the one thing that this move tells me is that DeMeco Ryans knows that he's got to get this offensive line fixed and playing his style of ball sooner than later, because one of two things is going to happen, or maybe both. CJ Stroud's going to get hurt, or the offensive line is going to be terrible. They won't be able to run the ball. The offense will be terrible. And DeMeco Ryans might not make it to his 6th year of his contract if he does not fix the offensive line. So I think that's what this move is about. And one thing it tells me for sure, we talked about last week, what should the Texans do in the first round of the draft? Well, I think it is obvious now. You are not drafting a wide receiver with the 25th pick. You should be looking at offensive line, specifically probably tackle. And I don't know if there will be any tackles available at 25. Perhaps you have to move up, but you got to get one. And the one I've been eyeing, and the one I've seen in a lot of mock drafts, is Kelvin Banks Jr. of the University of Texas. I talked about this on the Twin Toros podcast last week with Ruben. It appears, and I don't know this is purely speculation on my part, but based on them getting rid of Shaq Mason, getting rid of Laramie Tunsil, getting rid of Kenyon Green, those big, huge, powerful road grading types, specifically Kenyon Green and Shaq Mason, and sticking with your more agile, more limber Juice Scruggs, Blake Fisher. Is it possible that the Houston Texans are looking to switch their running scheme to a zone running scheme? DeMeco Ryans was coached by Gary Kubiak. He was coached with Kyle Shanahan. We all know the Shanahan system is a West Coast zone running scheme. I do not believe that the Texans, once DeMeco Ryans got here, had the personnel to run a zone running scheme, because they just didn't have the athletes, the more agile type of offensive linemen. So maybe that's the way that they are going to choose to go now. We'll find out in the draft. Kelvin Banks Jr., I think, could be a good zone running left tackle or right tackle. I think the guys that remain on the roster right now, I don't know that Laken Tomlinson is going to be a starter. I don't know that Ed Ingram is going to be a starter. But we'll see. We'll see. I saw a mock draft that had the Texans taking Kelvin Banks Jr., in the first round. That mock draft had him at 25. I don't know that he'll be there at 25. Lance Zierlein of the ESPN Houston 97.5, 92.5 morning show. He is also a NFL.com contributor and an NFL Network contributor. I saw a mock draft where he had the Texans trading up with the Cardinals to move to number 16 to take Kelvin Banks Jr. I'm going to keep it real with you. Did not watch a lot of college football this year. Watched a little bit of the Combine. And I've been watching YouTube videos of Kelvin Banks Jr. Listen, man, the risk you take when you're going young and you're drafting these offensive linemen rather than signing proven veterans like Will Fries, who is now signed. I wanted him. There's a few experienced offensive linemen that I thought that the Texans should have taken a look at, but all of them have been signed to other teams now. So you're stuck with the rotational type players in free agency and having to draft the future of your offensive line. It's risky, but I still say pull the trigger on it now. Because once again, you need a good, effective offensive line. So I would not be surprised if your first 2 picks in the draft perhaps are offensive line. The mock draft I saw, it was offensive line, Kelvin Banks Jr. in the first round. I believe it was wide receiver in the second round, and then another guard in the third round. And I wish I would have pulled up that mock so that I could show it to you. I messed up. But all that being said, the point is the Houston Texans are definitely going to need, like, there's no secret what they need in the first round now, which maybe that puts them at a little bit of a disadvantage, especially if they're going to have to move up for somebody. I think other teams know they might need to move up, and we could see a situation where teams are trying to outbid them for positioning to perhaps grab one of these top three left tackles that are projected to go in the first round. I'm happy with it, man. Draft a D'Amico type of guy. If you draft Kelvin Banks Jr., you're running a risk because he could not be good. He could be a bust. He could be another Kenyon Green. And I'm going to be really upset if Kenyon Green goes to the Eagles and all of a sudden balls out and becomes great. Similar to, you guys remember Brandon Brooks? No, actually, Brandon Brooks, he struggled early here. He was really good here by the time he left. But I don't know if the organization put a bad taste in his mouth or if he just wanted the bag. He ended up going to the Eagles and being really, really good and winning a Super Bowl there. If Kenyon Green does that, I don't know if I'm going to be able to handle that. That's going to really tick me off, to be honest with you. But yeah, I mean, the offensive line is going to look completely different. Other free agents, Sheldon Rankins is coming back. Good rotational defensive tackle. I believe they re-signed Tim Settle Jr. I don't know if they're going to bring back Foley Fatukasi yet. To my knowledge, they have not as of yet. They added Braxton Berrios at wide receiver, Darrell Taylor at safety. Darrell Taylor was from the Bears, if I'm not mistaken. They traded with the Jaguars for Christian Kirk. Added wide receiver Justin Watson from the Chiefs. That's another reason I can't see them going wide receiver in the first round. You added Christian Kirk. You added Justin Watson. You added Braxton Berrios. No, those guys, I'm not saying that room is solidified now. But 1, 2, Nico Collins, Christian Kirk, that's pretty decent. I don't know if Tank Dell is going to play next season or not. If you get him back, that could be some icing on the cake. But there's some good wide receivers you should be able to get in the second or third round. So so far I'm on board with everything the Houston Texans are doing. They brought back Dare Ogunbowale, solid move. They signed Nick Neiman, a 1-year special teams linebacker. He gets 1 year, $6.5 million. to play special teams. That is the NFL of today. Imagine making $6.5 million. And I'm not saying special teams isn't important. I'm not saying it's not a difficult job, but you're making 6.5 to, even with the new kickoff rules, you may not even have to do anything. You might just have to stand out there and watch a guy kick the ball into the end zone. That's a pretty sweet deal, man. And it kind of makes me mad that my parents didn't let me play football as a kid. I'm not saying I could be an NFL player, but I probably could have balled out in college and had a chance at least at being a special teams player and making 6.5. Oh, that's crazy. That's crazy. But yeah, the big question is, was this the right thing to do? I say yes. The offensive line was terrible last year. We all complained about it all season long. They were terrible. So what did the Texans do? They got rid of everybody, pretty much. You can't be mad at that. You just can't. And I think one of the reasons that it doesn't bother me is because we've talked about this so many times. I'm a more patient type of fan. Like, I don't think the Texans need to win the Super Bowl next year. I think they are taking the steps necessary to build a culture that lasts for hopefully years, decades even, similar to what we've seen in some other teams, like the Pittsburgh Steelers, like the Ravens, obviously the Chiefs. Like, these are teams, organizations that have built something that, you know, what Mike Tomlinson has built in Pittsburgh, it's probably going to last past whenever he decides to hang it up. And at this point, I think he's earned the right to do that whenever he wants to. He's going to pass this thing on to someone else. At least that's the hope, right? I mean, we all thought that about Bill Belichick and Gerard Mayo. That didn't work out too well. But the Texans are trying to build something that's lasting. And so I think you have your franchise quarterback. You've got a franchise wide receiver. You have got to establish who your franchise offensive line is going to be. And listen, Laramie Tunsil is 31 years old. Got 2 years left on his deal. He probably was going to want to start talking about a new deal this year. And if you knew you weren't going to pay him, then you did the right thing. You traded him. And you got a pretty good draft haul for it too. So, you know, maybe your tackle for the future is not in this year's draft. Maybe it's in the upcoming draft. Who knows? I would like to see them go left tackle. If they could get Kelvin Banks Jr. Out of the University of Texas, I think that would be super sweet, and I'd be down. And let him play tackle or let him play guard or whatever. Right tackle, let him play guard. Whatever he needs to do to get himself prepared to be the left tackle of the future. And I'd be excited about it. But it's been an active free agency period, and it's got me excited for the draft coming up in April. I can't wait to see what the Texans do. I say that the state of the Houston Texans is still very strong. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the state of the Houston Rockets. It really bothers me when that happens. When my sound skips out like that. So, sorry, I'm changing the privacy on my video, which I should have done earlier. A little behind the curtain there. The Houston Rockets have won 5 games in a row. They are back up at the number 1 seed for now. It's very, very, very tight and crowded at the top of that list. They have the tiebreaker over the Memphis Grizzlies, which is why they're currently in 3rd place. Last night, they won their 42nd game of the season, blowing out the Dallas Mavericks. Now, the Dallas Mavericks are basically playing a G League team at this point because of all of their injuries. They should tank the rest of the season, in my opinion. That's probably what they are going to do. There's no reason for Anthony Davis to come back. You got Kyrie out for the season. But this is a Houston Rockets podcast. I'll let that be their problem. But the Rockets won their 42nd game, which guarantees that they will finish this season with a winning season for the first time in 5 years. Congratulations to them for that. Absolutely. For those of you who have been rocking with this team over the last 4 or 5 years of just abysmal basketball, congratulations to you. I'm including myself in that group. Barring a catastrophic collapse, the Houston Rockets will be going to the playoffs this season for the first time since 2020. The question is, are they ready for the playoffs? And are they the team that everyone wants to play? Well, recently, Del Olele of the ESPN Houston, shout out to them again. He does a show from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. Monday through Friday on ESPN Houston, 97.5 FM and 92.5 FM. You can also catch all of their lineup on their YouTube channel, which I will put a link in the description of this video or audio that you're listening to once this live is over. But Del hosts a 2-hour show from 10 to 12 every day, and I have a lot of respect for what he does. And I can't remember his producer's name, but I'm going to share with you a clip from their show because they were talking about this very subject on the Rockets, the team that everyone, quote, wants to play. I'll let you hear that now.
I think the Rockets are a team a lot of teams want to see, because if you can keep it close, you can assume they're going to find ways to not execute late. Some of this has been done with Fred VanVleet on the floor. Some of it has been done without him. I think we look across the potential playoff matchups and everyone's like, you know what? Bring this team who's never done it before in a series, and we'll see how we fare, as opposed to playing one of the real contenders. If the Rockets rise up to a top seed where they have home court advantage, I think any of the teams below them who they might see in the playoffs would maneuver themselves to try to play them.
Yeah, if they're the 3 or the 4 seed, they're the team where you do the segment. What's an upset that could happen, or what's the team with home court advantage that could lose? And like the Rockets would probably be that pick, depending on who they play, I guess. But they would be the likely one that you point at and go, well, the team that's never done it before.
That's an interesting perspective, and I think, and shout out to Del. I hope I didn't butcher your last name. I believe it's Olele. I actually looked up the pronunciation, and there was 2 different ones, so it's one of those. And I saw that clip, and I thought, on the surface, that's really not a bad take. So I'm not like here to torch him or tell him that he's wrong. On the surface, I would understand why he would say that. I would understand why other teams may think to themselves, oh, here are the Houston Rockets, a team that has not been to the playoffs in 5 years, a team that has almost no playoff experience on their roster other than Fred VanVleet. And I guess Jock Londell has a little bit. And Jeff Green, well, don't forget Dylan Brooks. They have some playoff experience, but the majority of the team, the young core, has never even been close to the playoffs before. So I can understand why on the surface you would say, yeah, these teams should want to play them. They're not going to execute down the stretch of a close game. Well, that's just the part right there, that I respectfully disagree with. I don't think the reason other teams would want to play the Rockets is because that you can assume, as Del said, that they won't execute down the stretch and close games. If you ask the question why, I would say, well, what if I told you that the Rockets have played in 15 one-possession games? That's a game where you're either within 3, down by 3, up by 3, or 2. In those 15 one-possession games, the Rockets have a 9-6 record, including 2-1 record in overtime games decided by one possession. What if I told you that of the top 10 players who have the most games with clutch scenarios, that's last 4 minutes of the game is within 5 points. Of the top 10 players who have played the most games in that scenario, 4 of them are Houston Rockets. What if I told you that the Houston Rockets are tied with the Cleveland Cavaliers for the most wins in clutch games? Those are games decided by 5 points or less. with 21. The Rockets are 21-16 in that scenario. I believe the last time I checked, at least, Cleveland's record may be different now. They were 21-6. But I say all that to say, listen, I understand that the postseason and the regular season are not the same, but most of these players have never played in the postseason, so we can't blame them for that. All we have to judge them by is what they've done in the regular season, and what they've done in the regular season is execute in close games and win them. Now, they've also blown some close games, which for me is encouraging because that tells me they've already won. They're 21-16 in these games, but they actually have room to be better and improve. Now, will the weight of the postseason be what breaks that? It's possible, but all I'm saying is if you're guessing that other teams should want to play the Rockets strictly based on the fact that they're not going to execute down the stretch, in all honesty, that's just speculation. Because what they've shown you is that they can execute down the stretch. And the Rockets have had a flurry of injuries. They've had a bunch of different lineups out there. I think they've demonstrated to the rest of the league they're talented, they're deep. So I'm not saying Dell's completely wrong. He's probably right. There's probably a lot of teams who are like, ooh, you know what? If we play Houston, we probably have a really good chance. All I'm saying is that's going to be based strictly off the fact that they don't have playoff experience. It should not be based on the fact that you don't think they're going to execute down the stretch, because that's literally all they've done this season. And since I wrote that article, I wrote an article about this, on the Dream Shake. It was on this very subject. Are the Rockets the team everyone wants to play? And I said, hoping for a postseason matchup versus the Rockets might be fool's gold. Listen, man, historically, we want Houston has not gone well for the people who have expressed it. Now, of all the teams to want, this is probably the best one to want. They have the least experience. They don't have the playoff experience, and I get it. But the Rockets are balling right now. In their 5-game winning streak, they are number one defense in the NBA right now over the last couple of weeks. And they're starting to get healthy. I mean, they did what they did. Granted, it was against a depleted Dallas team. You know, they did it without Amen Thompson. They've gone through stretches without Jabari Smith Jr. They've gone through long stretches without Fred VanVleet. And they're 42-25. They're a good basketball team. And if you want Houston, all right, we'll see. Historically, that has not gone well for people who have expressed that sentiment. And it's not just the Astros. The 1995 Orlando Magic, they wanted Houston. They got Houston. The 1999 New York Liberty, they wanted the Houston Comets. They wanted revenge over the 97 team. They got Houston. And the Yankees stay wanting Houston. How's that worked out for you? Listen, I'm not comparing this Rockets team to, well, I guess I am kind of comparing this Rockets team to championship teams. All I'm saying is that if you think the Houston Rockets are going to be an easy out in the playoffs because they're young and because you think they're not going to execute in close games, I just disagree with that. And I might be wrong. We'll see what happens. You know, the postseason is a different animal than the regular season. Just ask James Harden. Ooh, low blow. Speaking of the Astros, really quick, I told you guys I'd let you know why I have not discussed the Astros up to this point. Like, spring training is damn near over. I haven't talked about the Astros because I have yet to sit and watch a spring training game from beginning to end. To be honest with you, I can't stand spring training. I just can't. And I love baseball, man. As compelling as baseball's postseason is, I love postseason baseball. It's probably my favorite postseason of all sports. As long as they leave it alone. Like, will you please stop adding teams, stop adding series? This stupid honestly, I've told you guys how I feel about this dumb 3-game series at the beginning. Like, that's for another show. But I love baseball's postseason. The regular season is too long, but I still watch it. I'm not going to sit here and act like I watch all 162 games, every pitch of them. But no, like I am engaged during the regular season. But spring training baseball is just boring to me, man. If I want to see Cam Smith's at bats, I'll just go watch the YouTube videos, the highlights. If I want to watch Forrest Whitley's bullpen appearance, I'll go watch it on YouTube. I'm not going to sit there and watch 3 to 4 hours of spring training baseball so I can watch guys who mostly will not be playing in the majors. Call me when the regular season starts, man. Call me when the roster's set and the games are for real, for real. I'm sorry. That's just how I feel about it. So that is why, to this point, I have not discussed the Houston Astros. However, I'm heavily considering next week's show on Wednesday being a strictly Houston Astros show. I'm going to go and I record all the games so I can go back and watch. I can watch highlights and I can just give my take on the roster and who I think should be on the big club. I'm going to say this right now. Just watching YouTube videos on the kid, I want Cam Smith to be on the big club. Spoiler alert. But overall, I'm not going to lie to you. I have not watched very much Houston Astros baseball in the spring training period. Call me when it's opening day, man. Then I'll be excited. That'll get the juices flowing. So overall, the state of the union for Houston sports is very strong. And I appreciate anybody who joined me either live or listened to or watched this video later. Next week's show will be on Wednesday. I am looking forward to getting back on a consistent schedule with the show. And I'm looking forward to the Houston Rockets last stretch of their season. I'm looking forward to the NFL draft, and I'm looking forward to opening day of baseball. There's a lot coming up. It is a great time to be a Houston sports fan, a great time to do Houston sports podcast and content. And that's why I do this here, and in association with 713 Houston Sports, my man Ruben Calavillo, and in association with ESPN Houston. And I'm so grateful for all of them. Really quick, let me remind you once again of the ways you can support this show. 1, you've been doing this entire time. You listen, you watched, share with your friends and family. Please like, follow, subscribe. Anywhere you get your podcast fixed, like, follow, subscribe to all of these socials. I will leave a link in the description or show notes of this video or audio that you're listening to. I will also leave a link to my tip jar if you'd like to leave me a tip. I will put anything you give me right back into this show. A donation of $50 or more will get you a Houston Sports State of the Union podcast hat, hoodie, t-shirt, any type of swag you want. All I need you to do is make sure you screenshot that you made that donation, and you can either send it to me in my DMs on my socials, or you can email it to hsstateoftheunionpod@gmail.com. If you've got my phone number, you can text it to me. However you want to do that, just make sure you let me know, because those donations are anonymous. Lastly, I will have affiliate links in the description of the video you're watching or the audio that you're listening to. Those affiliate links are for Houston Sports Fan Gear, and there will be some for all of the equipment I use to bring you this fine podcast. If you're interested in podcasting and you'd like to know, hey, what does he use? Well, I'll have some links, Amazon links in the description of here. And if you purchase anything from those Amazon links, I will get a little bit of change from that. But once again, the State of the Union in Houston is very strong. Great time to be a Houston sports fan. If you joined me live or you listen to this later, I appreciate you guys so much. I love you. What I want you to do until I see you on Wednesday is stay 10 toes down for the H. I love you, and good night.
This has been the Houston Sports State of the Union podcast, hosted by Nick Stevenson. Tune in next week for more news and analysis of your favorite Houston teams. Please follow the show on Facebook, Instagram, the app formerly known as Twitter, if that's even really still a thing. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more content.